Whether you're racing fast cars and fighting for your life while racing those cars, or just sitting around in diners talking shit with your friends, a perfect accompaniment is a cup of coffee. Hey, wait a second, we have a sponsor who sells that stuff. What a coincidence. Well, yes, we're in business with Sparkplug Coffee, who offer the very freshest beans in our home country of Canada. These beans are also of the Arabica variety, and they're premium and fairly traded. Sparkplug even has half-calf and full-on decaf for those who are already hepped up enough because Kurt Russell is trying to run them down. Sparkplug delivers their many blends and roasts, including different types of seasonal blends, to people in the United States and, naturally, in Canada. You'll get what you pay for in a week, or perhaps even less. And if you call Canada home as we do, then the shipping is free as a bird, baby. Now, I know what you're thinking. Is this just a Coffee of the Month club? Well, no, you suspicious person, it's 100% not. You can customize to get your stuff when you actually need it. If you're off shooting a movie on location with sexy friends, throw a pause in your membership and you won't come home to a bunch of stale stuff sitting on your front porch. But oh, being a member is the honey here. That gets you perks and deals that the coffee toe dippers aren't going to get. Plus you'll save money on every single order. So crack your knuckles and type in sparkplug.coffee/HYES. But don't forget to use our HYES promo code to get a one-time 20% discount. All right, we're seconds away from the beginning of our review here, but the best way to get there from here is for Andrew Luther to play that theme song he wrote for us. Maestro, do your thing.
And action. Have you ever seen
Death Proof? Hi, everybody, and thank you for taking part in the 505th edition of Have You Ever Seen? This is the Monday morning swan dive into the realm of classic motion pictures. If you haven't seen Death Proof after 16 years' worth of opportunities, then you'd better know now that we're going to spoil it. Now, while Robert Rodriguez's half of this double feature, Planet Terror, will probably come up today, we're going to focus on the Quentin Tarantino half. So I'm the Kia driver who would never have a rubber ducky hood ornament because I'm just not that big into ducks. Nor do I have a sexual fetish about the damage I cause. Ryan Ellis. And here's the lady who actually is into ducks, and he once dated a guy who you might call a foot fetishist. My wife, Jungle Bev Lukai.
That's me.
I'm correct about that, right?
No. Who are you talking about?
Your old stand-up act when you used to be a comedian. You talked about some dude.
The joke was that he hated feet.
Unless poo came out of them, that's what it was.
The joke was that... Okay, let's make this R-rated right away. The joke was that
Tarantino.
He hated feet, but he was always haranguing me to have anal sex.
There you go.
And I was like, how can you find feet gross? And there was nothing I could do to make him touch my feet. But then the joke goes, I guess if poo came out of them.
Mm-hmm. It's a good joke.
Thanks, I kind of spoiled it now, but I was quite proud of that one, despite its vulgarity.
Your delivery of it was pretty good, too.
Oh, thanks, dear.
Right now, you somewhat half-assed it, because it's been years, and I gave away part of it anyway. Okay, then, this will be R-rated. It is a Tarantino film. So the coming attraction's fucking trivia. The last scene in the movie where three women beat the living piss out of a guy is specifically paying homage to a 1960s action comedy. Which one?
Faster Pussycat, Kill, Kill!
Russ Meyer's film in 1965, yeah. I think her name is Tura Santana. She's not Rosario Dawson, but she's pretty hot too. And the other women look great as well.
Doesn't the haircut also attribute to Faster Pussycat Kill Kill?
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
Speaking of Rosario Dawson, by the way, I watched Clerks 3 a couple days ago. And it isn't that funny, but I like the emotion in it, even though Brian O'Halloran's not a great dramatic actor. But they found a way to get Rosie in the movie, and it's been 17 years since Clerks 2. And I thought that he made, meaning Smith and his cinematographer, made Dawson look as good as anybody had, I think, at that point. And that might still be true 17 years later. She's so beautiful in that movie.
She's your girlfriend.
Well, that's part of it. But I don't know what it is. A guy not known for his style and his look, friend of Tarantino, by the way, who is known for his style and look, especially in the last 15 or so years of filmmaking. So Thunderbolt, as you see very briefly, we laughed about that, where they have a title card that quickly goes away, becomes Death Proof, was released by the Weinstein Weinstein Company, in the spring of 2007. This was a throwback to the 70s grindhouse cinema that Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez remembered so fondly. The homage didn't pay off at the box office, though. I made sure to see it myself, partly because I had to see those trailers between the two films, which played before the beginning of the version of Death Proof we watched several days ago, which is the shorter version. It's about an hour and 40 minutes, including the trailers.
It's not all the trailers. Some of the trailers play...
At least 3 of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't. The Thanksgiving one is just called Thanksgiving, I guess. And Werewolves, Women of the SS,
yeah.
something like that.
Machete, the most famous
We didn't
ones.
see that, right?
Yeah, that's...
Machete.
Machete.
Please give us a skinny on Death Proof.
Kurt Russell is Stuntman Mike, a psychotic former stuntman with a taste for blood, and a death-proof muscle car that's designed to keep the driver safe no matter what happens to the car. Stuntman Mike uses this car as a weapon to murder a group of innocent women having a night out in Austin, Texas. He then sets his sights on 4 new women, Hollywood transplants shooting a movie in Tennessee. But he's got another thing coming, because these tough broads aren't that easy to kill. They turn it around on him and make sure that they're the last people he ever terrorizes.
I don't think it really matters that much, but is he a former stuntman?
Well, when he lists all of his work, it's all from the 70s.
Okay.
He's like a relic of his time.
Okay, yeah, and Kurt Russell did start acting in the 60s when he was young. He's been around for so long. And, of course, he's been in Tarantino's more recent movies. He hadn't really made many movies in the 2000s until this. And now he's been in a few Tarantinos since. He was, of course, in Hateful Eight, and he's got a smaller role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
There's a story about how Tarantino really wanted Mickey Rourke to have this part. Mm-hmm. He was friends with Mickey Rourke. I think they were neighbors or something.
This
so
is
they
before
knew
his
each
big comeback,
other.
too,
and
before The Wrestler.
Yes! Mickey Rourke really needed a job like this. He sent him the script and he liked it, and it all seemed like it was good to go. And then Mickey Rourke's agent got involved and knew Tarantino really wanted him, so started to try and strong-arm him. There was a point, he said, where he gave the agent, listen, here's our offer, say yes or no by midnight tonight. He said the agent never responded. And so he was like, we just moved on. He's like, I don't deal with that. I just picked a different actor.
His movies aren't that expensive either. He doesn't have gigantic budgets usually. And I don't think this did either. Funny thing as well, I said his comeback, meaning Rourke, was The Wrestler, which is true. But in a way, it was also Sin City by Robert Rodriguez.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Which was before this movie and before The Wrestler.
That would be a better explanation for why he would know him.
And he's great in Sin City. I loved him in The Wrestler, and I think he should have won the Oscar, but I love his work in Sin City also. But I don't think he would have been good casting for this, for one big reason. I think he could have done all the same things Russell did as well, and I love Kurt Russell, with the women in the bars and the restaurants and all that big build-up, and certainly the terrorizing them in the car. But would almost any actor we've ever seen, especially an established star like Russell, and somebody who'd been a huge star like Rourke, whimper and whine and shriek?
But if somebody else other than Kurt Russell got this part, and you had heard that Kurt Russell could have had it, would you have ever believed that
shriek?
Kurt Russell could?
No.
He's like a tough guy. That's part of what makes it so surprising.
And funny.
This
isn't Tarantino's funniest movie.
Kurt Russell, of all people, is shrieking. There are some actors where it wouldn't feel that far-fetched, where you could see them being babies like that. But for Kurt Russell to completely turn on a dime and become this shrieking sissy?
It's one of Russell's more underrated performances, for sure. When you were talking, I was saying, I don't know if anybody heard it, that this is not one of Tarantino's funniest movies either, but that stuff at the end is quite funny. Even though the women in this movie are great, the diner scenes, the restaurant scenes, and Tarantino's trying to bring that back again. He's done it in so many films, Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, and many others too, aren't as good in this. And it's not the actress's fault. The dialogue's fine. Maybe because he's done it before. I don't know.
I don't think the dialogue's fine.
Okay.
I think the dialogue drags. And the diner scene in particular where we first meet, actually it's not where we first meet them, but the diner scene that is like about the halfway mark when Zoe's with the gang and it's the new girls. He shoots it all in a oneer. And it often works, but you tie your hands behind your back when you shoot something. Exactly, you can't cut it. So if you have the pace is lacking, and you have quite a few new actresses in this. Obviously, Rosario Dawson is established; she's great. Zoe Bell is not an actress. This was one of the first acting jobs she ever had. They're not going to be able to pull off that snappiness. But I remember thinking this about 25th Hour, that Spike Lee movie, that there's this great oneer in it, but it drags because the actors are taking their time having a natural conversation. And the problem is, you could feel it on set, and then you could realize after the fact that actually this doesn't work, and it's too slow, the pacing isn't right. And there's nothing you can do about it because you shot it in a oneer.
And that movie didn't have a big budget either, so they couldn't really redo it, probably.
So it was like a gamble that they took that really drags the movie down in that point. And that's at a point where he's done something so radical and maybe poor judgment. I think a lot of people would think that killing all the characters we know in the halfway point of the movie and starting over with a fresh batch of characters, well, that's a pretty interesting choice. You really lose your audience. We are all disinclined to care at all about these new girls we're interested in.
You didn't then?
The first time I saw the movie, I didn't really like it that much. Oh. I got into the first half. I was interested in what was going on. They're setting up all these plots. There's this little love thing happening with Julia. There's this interesting thing where Stuntman Mike is flirting with Butterfly. I call her Butterfly. I can't remember her name.
But before that, he's flirting with with Rose McGowan's
With
character.
Pam, yeah.
We don't see the lap dances. It's cut out of this.
This scene exists. I think it's a deleted scene somewhere.
But this is part of the homage to 70s Grindhouse. It played so often that they had to cut it right out because it was unplayable.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is what
Reels would get
Tarantino and
destroyed.
Rodriguez and people of their time frame, we were too young to see any of this stuff. I was born around the time that they were homaging the early 70s.
How much do you want to bet that back then, when you had these B, C, D films that would get made cheap and quickly and probably were really cheap to see, and the entire allure of them was the sex and the violence and the swearing? How much do you want to bet that projectionists would steal scenes like that?
Oh.
When it went from theater to
Hadn't thought of
theater to
that.
theater, because they would travel. By the time it reaches your city, maybe some projectionist was just like, yoink.
I never thought of that. That's a good point. So you prefer the first batch of characters, even though you've got the more famous actors. Well, Dawson especially, and I don't know if Mary Elizabeth Winstead was famous yet, but
No, I don't think so.
she was getting to be known. She was in Die Hard 4, I think it was, at this point, that
Has she
same
been in
year,
Scott-
2007.
Has she been in Scott Pilgrim yet at this point?
That came later, I believe.
Oh, did it? Okay. That's when I really knew who she was, after Scott Pilgrim.
Okay.
She became
But
an
then
actress
again,
I
the first
recognized.
batch, they're daughters of famous people, if not all of them. Jordan Ladd is the daughter of Cheryl Ladd. She's so cute. She reminds me so much of our friend Jill.
Yeah, she does.
And of course, we said it during the screening, we loved Sidney Poitier. So for those who don't know, Sydney, Sidney Poitier, the famous actor's daughter, is Jungle Julia. I don't know why she didn't get work out of this. I think she's terrific. It's her and Dawson in a way. Well, maybe it's her and Tracy Toms, the black woman in the second half, are the two surrogates for each other in each half, I guess, because they're the leaders of their group. I guess, really? The second half doesn't really have a leader so much, but certainly Jungle Julia is the leader of the first part because she's a famous local DJ in Austin. But she is sexy, and she's, I think, quite good in this film, and she didn't do that much after it.
She's cool
And
as
she's
hell.
cool, too. Yeah. And she's the daughter of a famous actor. You think that would have made a difference, too.
Yeah, she's wonderful in this movie. Maybe she didn't want to, or I don't know. You just never.
She's been
really
doing
know what's
TV.
going on.
There's nothing wrong with doing
Okay,
TV,
so she's
but
still working, but yeah.
I always
pretty
wonder if some
surprising.
people might prefer doing TV because it is an easier schedule, generally
Oh, yeah,
speaking. And the last 5 or 10 years, or even more maybe, it's not the slum it used to be. It's in some ways better than movies.
I think it's probably safe to say that there are some actors who are wonderful in specifically Tarantino movies.
You always bring up
Michael Madsen.
Right.
I've never seen him be good in anything else, and yet.
Free Willy.
Okay, well,
I don't remember him in that.
I've never seen Free Willy, so maybe I'm wrong. I guess I can't speak on that. But other things I've seen him in, I'm shocked at how much I dislike him as an actor. But every time he's in a Tarantino movie,
Home run.
him in Reservoir Dogs, he makes that movie.
Yeah.
He is so sinister and believable.
And cool.
And cool. God, he's so incredible in that movie. So some actors really need the right director to
Right.
pull it out of them, to know how to work with them. Tarantino, being what appears to be the most self-absorbed, annoying person in Hollywood, somehow has the magic touch with actors.
I don't think he's even close to the most self-absorbed, but he is
Okay,
self-absorbed.
you're right. Maybe not the most self-absorbed, but definitely in competition for the most annoying person in
Jared
Hollywood.
Leto's higher on that list, without a doubt.
Well, I don't know. I think he's a level above annoying.
Jada Pinkett Smith is higher on that list. Okay, so let's get back to the part we usually have already done at this point. So, Death Proof in a nutshell. You did your big build-up. I usually go in a nutshell for those who are new to this. Young actress launches vengeance campaign on her rapist, not to mention former friends who subjected her to said rapist. And I'm talking about Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who's left behind with that Jasper guy. Okay, maybe he's not going to rape her. But that last shot we see of her, we don't even see his upper half. It might as well be that he's got his cock out. And Winstead, who's always been pretty, is so beautiful in this movie, too. And she's wearing a cheerleader outfit. The suggestion, especially because of the homage of the movie they're doing, is that something's going to go on. She's collateral. And they come back with a destroyed car. It's drivable, so they must have driven it back there. Let's mind what happens next. Either the production pays for that car, because I don't think they have the money for it. But she was collateral, so that's what I mean. They probably left her to get raped. Don't you agree?
That was a long-winded way of saying, of course I agree. One of the worst choices Tarantino has ever made is that plot line, that they leave her there. They have their own kick-ass car that they
Right.
could just leave there as collateral. Just take her with you or leave her somewhere safe. But the idea isn't even just that they leave her there as, quote, collateral. Oh, of course, we're going to come back for our friend.
Oh, his payment
It's
is
that
to get the fucker.
Abernathy is very strongly implying, hey, our friend here is going to look after you. No woman would do that unless she is a villain. It's not funny to me, and I don't think it's funny to any woman watching
Okay.
this movie.
I think it's supposed to be funny, though. In the
Well,
scene.
it's not. I'm just saying it was a huge misstep on Tarantino's part.
But Dawson, it's interesting, too, because she's cool always, and she is in this. But you're right, that's a villainous thing in a way. And also, she's the one that says, because they want to leave her behind when they finally realize they can track Mike down and get revenge, she's the one that says, let's kill this bastard. You know that they're going to go do something to him, but she's making it plain out that, and she's the one that stomps his face at the end, so I guess he dies. Stuntman Mike, if he is still working, I guess that movie production or TV production needs a new stuntman.
Yeah, that's a kill shot.
Although maybe you're right that he isn't actually working anymore. All right, so the numbers on Death Proof. 66% of the critics like this film. Barely a fresh tomato. I think this is his worst score ever, Tarantino. Only 5.6 out of 10, though. So I guess you had some ravers and then some people that hated it to make it not even 6 out of 10 as an average. There are only 44 reviews on the site, though. But then again, Grindhouse, when you look up Grindhouse specifically in Rotten Tomatoes, it's 84%. The two of them combined. I don't really know why that's any different. And we're watching the shorter version, which is what people saw in theaters. The 2-hour-plus version came out in theaters later on. So maybe that's what this is.
You saw it in theaters as Grindhouse, right?
Yeah, I made sure to see it because of Tarantino's fame, and I was really curious about the trailers between. I was even curious about the Rodriguez section of this because I loved Sin City only 2 years before this.
I'll admit that seeing it in theaters with the trailers, with the whole Grindhouse experience.
I went to the washroom about the end of Planet Terror because I didn't want to miss the trailer.
Right, exactly.
I had to pee at least once in 3 hours. It was a 3-hour production.
It was altogether a much better experience than watching these movies at home. I don't know about you, but I saw it in a pretty packed crowd of all fans. Cinema. Oh, okay, all real cinema fans, like the kind of people who are going to go see a movie like this. Chances are they're excited about it. And the energy was real in that movie theater. And the laughs were huge. It was a gutsy move for them to do this. I mean, they were both in a position where they could truly write their own ticket, and they did something downright radical. I'm sure there was no studio in the world that would have greenlit this project unless they had that much influence and power. And
but they both were Weinstein people at that point.
Sure, but it also was a mistake because the movie kind of failed. It's considered Tarantino's worst film.
He says if it's his worst film, he can live with that. And I think it is his worst film.
Yeah.
But it's still, to me, definitely a thumbs up. We wouldn't be covering it if it wasn't.
Even bad Tarantino is still Tarantino. It's got to be the 4th time I've seen it. I can't say it's that bad of a film if I've watched it 4 times, if there's something that keeps me coming back to it over and over again.
Yeah.
I looked up other films that came out in the same year, in 2007, and I can maybe name 2 that I've seen that many times. Sure, I've probably seen No Country for Old Men 4 times. Sure, I've probably seen Juno that many times or more. But that's that short list. Do I think Death Proof is a better movie than There Will Be Blood? No, of course not. There Will Be Blood is a masterpiece, but it's just not something that I'm that likely to put on. It can't be that bad of a movie if it's this watchable for us.
I agree.
Although I know lots of people who are Tarantino fans who pretend this movie doesn't exist.
The stunts alone. Because Zoe Bell obviously did them because she's a stunt woman anyway. So she's really on the roof of that car, probably strapped in more than it's implying. She's not strapped in at all, of course, in the scene itself. But that's pretty gutsy stuff. And then you cast somebody who I think is fine as an actress. She's not great. She was Uma Thurman's stunt double in the Kill Bill films. And you can tell she looks enough like her that makes sense. And this is his next project after the Kill Bill films. So he cast somebody he obviously got to know. He put her in The Hateful Eight as well.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Right, she's in that too as a stunt woman, I think.
I can't remember.
Stunt organizer.
She yells at Kurt Russell.
She's Kurt Russell's wife, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just finish up the numbers and we'll get back to the conversation. So 71% of audiences like the film, which is a little stronger than the critics. But again, I'm talking about just Death Proof specifically. Grindhouse got 84 from the critics, and I didn't look up the audience numbers. This was 96 at the 2007 U.S. box office, but did I look up if it's just this or if it's Grindhouse? Because this came out by itself later that year. I don't remember, but we know it failed. Hairspray was 24th, No Country for Old Men was 36th, and There Will Be Blood was 66th. We've covered all 3 of those movies in the past. And each of Tarantino's 4 films since this have won at least 1 Oscar, but this did not get nominations, and had there been a stunt category then, there still isn't now, this probably would have at least been up for that. All right, we've been talking for a long time already. You just said you liked the movie. Go ahead with the rest of your opening thoughts.
It's like calling something the worst Michelin-rated restaurant. Where it's still so much better than every other restaurant. I have found myself defending this film over the years. I particularly think that the car chase is so legendary that it just compels me to forgive all of the film's flaws.
And he shot it. He was a cinematographer. The only time he's ever been a cinematographer.
It's a shame this movie is underseen because it belongs in category of the greatest action sequences of that decade. It's incredible. And at a time where already Hollywood would rarely shoot something like this in a practical...
Right.
It would all be digital, or at least most of it would be. But part of the way Tarantino wanted to work is he really did want to shoot the stunts old school, although he betrays the conceit of Grindhouse plenty.
True.
Yeah.
This is far classier than Planet Terror is.
Planet Terror really sticks with the
Yeah, he got into
idea.
the muck and the mire with that movie. It's pretty disgusting for one thing. This isn't really like that at all. This is far classier.
Yeah, and it keeps that low quality look throughout, whereas...
Deliberately, yes.
Yeah.
They scratched the print, yeah.
Yeah, okay, but look at Death Proof. So the first half hour, you have tons of scratches on the print. Very terrible continuity.
You're right.
Like a lot of messiness.
But not
these
during the car
sloppy
chase.
Cuts. Beyond that, so around the time they get to the bar, I would say after Julia explains the concept of the butterfly thing, that someone's going to come say a poem to her and she might have to give them a lap dance. I'd say after about that, when we get into the true body of the film, the inciting incident has been explained. Okay, we still have scratches, we still have the odd messy cut, but suddenly the continuity errors are gone. There's very little in there that's going to distract you. Well before the car chase, pretty much by the time we meet the second batch of girls, there's almost no damage. When that car chase starts, it's immaculate.
Yeah.
He completely betrays that as a style.
Which I don't think Rodriguez ever does.
No, and I think it's a flaw in the film. He doesn't really commit the way Rodriguez did, and the Rodriguez film, the tone is so consistent throughout. Grindhouse has a bit of a tone problem.
Well, missing the lap dance, you said your audience all went, oh, man.
Yeah, they really did.
But isn't that important, obviously? In Planet Terror...
It was a great laugh, as a matter of fact.
Well, there you go, yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's the point, though, too, is to make us laugh. The missing scene in Rodriguez's film, as I recall, was a pretty important one. Somebody died or something really important happened, some violence happened, and they're talking about it, but we missed it because that's the point. Mm-hmm. So Rodriguez in that way also commits more.
Mm-hmm. The movie that he ultimately wanted to make, it's almost like he took the movie and he strong-armed it into this concept so that he could make the movie that he wanted to make. And of course it still fits. It's kind of a slasher movie, I suppose. It's like a car chase / slasher movie.
Mm. Look at the violence when the first batch of girls dies. It is graphic.
Yes.
That's got to be obviously digital and dummies and stuff.
Which, of course, is part of the reason that people would go see Grindhouse movies in the first place. It was movies meant for teenage boys who were either 18 and over or lied about how old they were to get in to see these movies. I doubt they were that strict. And they just wanted to see boobs and blood. Roger Corman, that was his whole business model.
We don't see boobs in this, do we?
No, we see them in the trailer. The Werewolf Women of London or whatever it is. The Werewolf of the SS, that's it. Yeah, Werewolf Women of the SS. You see lots of tits in that trailer.
But none of these, well, they're not really stars other than, I guess, Dawson. But
yeah,
it's a little bit surprising that they don't.
Yeah, you see a lot of feet. He really indulges his foot fetish.
Well, one of the cut scenes from the version that we watched and the version that was in theaters as the twosome is when, I think it's Dawson, is got her feet out the car when the other girls are in a store or something like that, and he walks by and very slightly touches them. And the notion is that, oh, I love feet, because, of course, Tarantino's accused of having a huge foot fetish.
I think he's...
Has he ever admitted it?
I don't think he's ever denied it.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a funny story about his foot fetish, which is that when he was promoting...
Oh, you told us this on Jackie Brown.
Oh, okay.
He showed up to promote at your work.
Yeah, he came to the TV studio where I work. Everyone I worked with was so excited that he was there. And more than a few women wore their best, tallest high heels to get his attention.
Right. Well, speaking of tall people, Julia, Jungle Julia, Sidney Poitier, I think she's 6 feet. I think I looked it up during the screening, and that's how tall she is. So we see her early on. She's reclining on the couch and smoking a bowl, which reminds me so much of what apparently Tarantino has done, or at least used to do. Now that he's a father and married, maybe not so much. But in the 90s, when he was building his home theater and buying things he never could have afforded before, apparently, though, he also, maybe before all this too, was a big pot smoker.
Do you think he talks at normal speed when he's high?
Do I?
Well, we always joke that if you ever did cocaine, you would turn into an auctioneer.
Yeah, right. And then we see her reclining in the back of the car, which, again, I think Dawson does in her section when Stuntman Mike comes by and touches her feet. This is part of the reason why I liked her so much, because he set up that she's going to be this superstar, and she is in Austin as a DJ. What happens to her when the car hits them, specifically, of course, her whole body gets mangled, but her leg gets ripped off because she's got it hanging out the window.
Another big audience reaction when that happened, because that's an unexpected little moment of gruesomeness, which was followed pretty quickly by the car tire tearing up Arlene's face.
Yeah, Vanessa Ferlito is her character. I don't think she did that much after this either. I think she's pretty good, too.
Well, she does a lot of TV. She was in, like, CSI New York. Yeah.
Tracy Toms, she's the driver in the second half, the black woman. She was in both Descent and Rent with Rosario Dawson. I don't know if they shared any scenes. They probably did in Rent. So they've run at least 3 movies together in a pretty short period of time there. Descent, not in The Descent, but there's a movie called Descent where Dawson...
About the Spelunkers?
Yeah, not that one. But back to the first half again. So We do see Mike mowing down nachos at the bar. Pretty disgusting close-up of him doing that. We talked on Revenge 2 weeks ago about how when Dimi is eating something, sweets or something like that, before the rape scene. It's pretty gross, too. It's a pretty good way to establish that somebody's a villain when you do that. I don't know why, but it just looks so gross. Either the person's going to be a gross character who's not a villain, or they're a villain if you do something like that. But he talks to the angry Pam at the bar, and that's Rose McGowan's character. She's in both movies. So is Marley Shelton. I think she's a nurse in both movies. They're playing the same character. Maybe.
Oh, yeah, she is.
She's one of the key characters in the Planetara one.
I think the cops are in both, too, aren't they?
McGraw's.
And they're the same cops from Kill Bill.
Michael Parks ended up being a favorite of Kevin Smith for a while there, too. I mentioned Kevin Smith again. He was the, I guess, main character in Red State. Such an unusual movie for Smith to make. All these guys seem to love that guy so much, like he's this incredible actor. He's good, but Jesus, calm down, guys. And his son does play his son in the movie as a cop.
Son number 1.
Right. But the key thing here, too, with Mike, and obviously this is part of his M.O., is that he's not drinking anything, but the women are. They've got alcohol in their system and a lot of it, but he does not. So the suggestion being that he couldn't possibly have been responsible for the accident if he was stone cold sober, but they weren't.
No, it's true, and cops will just look at that, and that'll be it. They don't need any more evidence. If one person was drunk, they're at fault of the accident.
Just thought of something. What about the fact that the white man, and then a bunch of women, and some of them are not white themselves?
Of course.
So that might be part of it, too. And this is in Texas.
But later we learn that he's a liar when he says that he's a teetotaler, because after he gets shot in the second half of the film, pulls out a bottle of wild turkey, takes a big chug, and then uses the rest to cleanse his wound.
That's right. Could be that he suggests that he isn't when he's working, and to him, I guess, stalking and killing these women is working.
Well, to him, he's just strategizing for when he survives and they're all dead, and it's just a way of getting away with it.
Yeah, he isn't dead in his car, because, of course, the car is death-proof. But he is pretty badly hurt. It takes him a few months to recover, I guess. Yeah. And apparently Sean Penn is the one who told Tarantino about this death-proof thing, that if you give your car to a stunt team, which is what Mike says in this movie, they can make it so that you're not going to die. I do like how, we talked about this in Jackie Brown last year, Samuel L. Jackson talks Chris Tucker into the trunk of that car, and it basically makes sense as to why he needs to be there. And then, of course, drives a little ways away, opens the trunk, and kills Chris Tucker. Mm-hmm. But in this movie, when Mike gets Pam to get inside and explaining why he's got this little rocket seat there, well, you got to put the camera there sometimes. Okay, that makes sense. But the real reason, of course, is because not only is he safe, but you're even more vulnerable sitting the way he set it up in the passenger seat. And she does apparently get killed when her face smashes into the dashboard, which he does on purpose.
Well, they actually show her die, gurgling.
That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You really need to be sitting in my seat.
Yeah.
And then...
He is one of the great Tarantino villains. One of the many great things Tarantino does is he just knows exactly what an audience wants when it comes to a villain.
So we said we missed the lap dance, but he does recite the poem that would have gotten them a lap dance. At least we see that scene. And we talked about the head-on collision and the aftermath of that. So now we have to get into the part with... I guess we've already talked about a lot of this, really. We've really jumped around today. But when they want to borrow the car, the 1970 Challenger, full mast or...
Ship's mast.
Ship's mast,
like she's
right.
like the mermaid on the front of a ship,
That's right, yeah.
And it's the car from... What's the movie called?
Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, or The Vanishing Point. Maybe The
Vanishing Point. It was The Vanishing Point.
Because that's what this movie's homaging to. They weren't really Grindhouse films per se, I don't think. But yeah, it's homaging those kinds of films too. And they want to leave Rosario Dawson behind. But apparently Rosario Dawson was actually in the car for, I'm sure not all of it, but a lot of those shots when she wouldn't have needed to be. You got to see Tracy Thoms driving a lot of the time. I'm sure she and Kurt Russell did a lot of this driving too. At some points you can blatantly tell. Maybe some of it's digital, but I don't think so. But Dawson didn't need to be in the car as much as she was, but she said part of the reason why she wanted to do this movie was because she wanted to be in the car during this long sequence. It's funny, too, that the biggest star of those three women doesn't really have an important role in what they're doing. She could have been the driver, but it is Tom's. So you know I love her, and I think you're a fan, too. But what did you think of her? And then again, all of them. I guess we've already talked about Zoe Bell.
Yeah, Zoe Bell's kind of the only weak link, and I just...
She has my favorite moment in the whole movie, though, other than the whining and the shrieking. I love that so much, because they think she's dead, and he does drag it out for a bit. Pops up, I'm okay.
And even as I say, she's the weakest actress of the bunch. She absolutely is, but she's so charming. I want her to be on screen all the time. Her stunt work is just out of this world. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. Who else could do that? So could this movie be made without a stunt woman at the ship's mast? Without someone like her doing that part? It would just look different, and it would be a little more compromised. And as much as she's not the strongest actress, she just adds so much character to the film. Also so neat that she's just playing herself.
Yes.
She's playing Zoe Bell. That's her character. Mm-hmm. Everybody else is a fictional character except for her.
And she wasn't involved in the film shoot until that point. Or she's just visiting them. I don't think she's necessarily going to be involved in their film at all.
Why would she fly all the way in from New Zealand just to visit them? She must be involved in the shoot somehow. I guess that it was just that she wasn't needed until they got to this part of the shooting.
That must be what it was, yeah. Because Winstead's an actress. Dawson's the makeup artist, I believe.
Yeah.
And then Tom's is already doing stunts, and now Belle's going to join her. I also like, too, when Mike is finally run off the road by them and he can't drive the car anymore, plus he's badly hurt from being shot by Tracy Toms, when he says, I'm sorry. He's trying to talk his way out of it.
I was just trying to have a little fun.
And it's so vital. And we know it's so vital that he was going to kill them because we saw him do it to the other ones.
So I found this video essay on YouTube. Somebody made the argument that Stuntman Mike is a bit of a stand-in for Quentin Tarantino. Stuntman Mike is a maybe washed-up stuntman through no fault of his own. It seems like he was obviously a really good driver. He had a great career, but films and TV changed. They stopped using drivers, started going digital, so his work dried up. And now the only way he can replicate this thrill he used to get from driving is by using his talent and his car to kill women. Young women specifically.
Oh, there's supposed to be something in the screenplay, by the way, that he was jerking off after he kills the 4 women.
Oh, really? Well, it's clear that he's turned on by it. There's clearly a sexual component. There's so much stuff going on with the flirtation, with Arlene, the whole butterfly thing, touching Rosario Dawson's feet. He's getting off on it. It's pretty clear. Young women who he targets, they are also the people who very much dismiss him. They never heard of these TV shows and movies that he used to work on. But once upon a time, that kind of work probably got him lots of girls. He probably used to be their hero, the real cool guy, and now they kind of laugh at him a little bit, and that drives him crazy, and he wants to punish them. I'm not suggesting that Tarantino's like that.
A lot of this I can buy, by the way, except for the being washed up part.
I don't think Tarantino has an issue with women laughing at him and wanting to target women.
Well, probably not, but when you said washed up in the beginning of this whole little bit here, I'm thinking that's the one thing I do not agree with at all.
Okay, I'm going to get to the point
Okay,
now.
go ahead.
Okay, so Tarantino's also stuck a little bit in this bygone era of filmmaking. He's always homaging the films he grew up watching, and he seems very committed to making films the way they were made back then.
And only using film.
He avoids using CGI. He insists on shooting on film. He's one of the few filmmakers who actually has the clout and the inclination to absolutely insist that his films get not just shot on film, but screened on actual film with a projector. You and I both saw The Hateful Eight and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood on one of the only 70mm screens in Toronto with an actual 70mm projector projecting it. I'll admit that it was cool to see a film print. There was a certain nostalgia for real that comes with seeing the dust and the cigarette burns. Is it the game changer that Tarantino thinks it is? Oh, I don't think so, but I'm glad it's there for us to experience. It definitely added some charm to those films. But there's this strange hypocrisy. He insists everything looks better on film while having this reverence for all these films, these Grindhouse films.
That look like shit.
That look like shit.
We're probably never that good looking to begin with.
Yeah, I kind of think his obsession with the way things were done back then has more to do with the fact that everything is cooler when you're a teenager, seeing everything for the first time. It's just nostalgia, no objection. But I just roll my eyes when he insists it's not nostalgia, that it was actually better, and that his insistence this is the only way movies should ever be made, and he has made some broad statements to this effect, saying that they aren't even real cinema, and how could this experience is garbage. Too, like maybe not like they're not real cinema, but he's made some very big statements about how digital is so bad that he doesn't even consider it film.
One of his best friends, Rodriguez, was doing digital before almost anyone else was.
Well, this is one of my points. You love the Corman movies, but those were made on the cheap. So many great creators came out of that school because they could do whatever they wanted and they were given opportunities that they never would have been given if everything had the same polish as the studio. Yeah. And if you're going to insist that real films are only shot on film, well, then you're actually shutting out an insane amount of talent that have opportunities they never would have had because it is so cheap to shoot on digital and there's so many opportunities for people to create that they never had before.
Well, and he and Rodriguez are two people that didn't have this opportunity because of a dad. I have nothing against the Nepo baby thing, generally speaking. We said one already. Sidney Poitier is a good actress in this movie, but would we know her if she wasn't Sidney Poitier's daughter? Maybe not. But there's some really talented people that got a job, but they can't say they weren't helped by their name because they probably were. That's not true about Tarantino and Rodriguez, who came around the same time, making very low budget. Well, Tarantino had some connections in a way because he got to know, I think, Bruce Willis through Friends or something like that.
Yeah, but he worked connections.
But he had to, yes, it wasn't automatically there. And Rodriguez made his own movie, El Mariachi, by selling his body for science. They did experiments on him, raised the money that way, and like most of his movies, made it almost himself.
And he's always maintained that attitude about making films.
He does almost more jobs than Chaplin did, except for the acting.
Yeah. And he makes movies on the cheap. Proudly will make a movie so under budget that he can use the leftover budget to make whatever he wants.
Because so much of it is green screen as well. The Spy Kids movies are a good example of that. And so obviously Sin City, that a lot of it he did himself, obviously with other people, but he has his own visual effects company as well in, I think it's Austin, where he's from.
Ah, that explains.
That's part of why it's set there for this. Yeah, you're right about Tarantino in a lot of ways. I don't agree with the washed up part exactly, of course. Sometimes it does happen to a great filmmaker. They're great for 10 years or so, and Quentin hadn't made that many movies in that 15 years since he came on the scene at the time of this film. But the other stuff I guess I could buy. People laughing at him, I don't know if I buy that so much, but I got what you're going with that whole thing.
I guess my point is more that they both long for the same era. They both feel like everything was better at a certain point of time, and that's where they belong, and the whole world has moved on without them. Although that's not really true. You're right. Maybe it's bad to say that they're compared to one another, but I think Stuntman Mike loves the same things that Tarantino loves.
Well, that's typical of a lot of
the same things.
Typical of a lot of his characters.
Yeah, that's fair.
So Kurt Russell, who is so good in this movie as Stuntman Mike, we covered The Thing, of course, long ago, The Hateful Eight. He was also in Miracle and Scoring at the Movies that Chris and I did several years ago, one of my favorite sports movies. I covered Zoe Bell's credits, of course. Rosario Dawson, 25th Hour, we did that just last year, right? And Sin City, where she is so hot and so cool as well. And she was in He Got Game, which Chris and I covered on Scoring at the Movies. I mentioned Tracy Toms working with Dawson in both Rent and Descent, not The Descent. Sidney Poitier was in True Crime. I forgot about that. She was in that about 8 years before this film, the Eastwood film, but I see here just mostly TV after that. Rose McGowan was in both the films. I think it's a different character in both of them.
Yes.
We covered Scream, and Chris and I covered her in Ready to Rumble on Scoring at the Movies. Jordan Ladd, who's so cute, was in Cabin Fever for Eli Roth, who's briefly in this, as is Tarantino at the bar. Neither of them is a great actor. Roth is better than Tarantino. I've said it on Jackie Brown and probably other podcasts about Tarantino. He was never a good actor, and yet, as you said to us on Jackie Brown, he wanted to be an actor more than anything else.
Yeah, that was why he made movies, to give himself opportunities to act.
Right. But Ladd's been in some horrific films. There's a horror element to this, obviously. What happens to her and her friends, for one thing. But she was in Cabin Fever for Roth, like I said, and also Inland Empire for Lynch the year before. I think the year before the year of this. I covered Winstead's credits. Oh, she was in The Thing, though, by the way. So Russell's in the original Thing. She was in The Thing prequel. Vanessa Ferlito was also in 25th Hour with Dawson. I don't think they share any scenes together. And we do see Roth and Omar Doom, the two guys that kill Hitler in Inglourious Bastards. They were both in this before that. And then Marley Shelton, who's been in Pleasantville and Sin City. She's got the small role in this, as does Nikki Cott, who is also in Sin City and in Gremlins, which we covered when he was a kid, I think. Tarantino, the writer, the director, the actor, also a producer on this, along with Rodriguez, and Rodriguez's then wife, Elizabeth Avalon, and of course the Weinsteins were executives. I know they're terrible, but they did give us a lot of great films from these two filmmakers. We've covered everything Tarantino's ever done now after today, except for the one we'll probably do next year, maybe in the summer or around Christmas, when it's going to be 5 years old, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And briefly about that, I saw something, which it must have been when they were promoting it 4 years ago, where some critic asked Margot Robbie or asked Tarantino about her not having very many lines, and he basically just said, "You're fucking wrong." I got thinking about this again, the end of that movie. She's not even on camera until the very end of it, and it's only from behind anyway. I think one of the best things she's ever done is her voiceover at the end of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I fucking love it so much. It almost makes me cry. I just love it.
I never understand that criticism, because that's just the part. If he had cast a less famous actress in that role, would anybody care?
I don't know if they would.
She agreed to do the small part. Lots of very famous actors agreed to do very small parts in Tarantino movies.
Yep.
And you can never accuse Tarantino of not writing and creating some of the best roles for women in Hollywood. I'm not going to sit here and say that, oh, he's a feminist hero. He's a very complicated person who has said some astronomically stupid things that make me roll my eyes. I love his films so much, and sometimes I feel like I ought to be embarrassed at how much I love his movies, because some people think he's either basic or he's an embarrassing person because he's such a weirdo and says such crazy stuff.
He's a little less weird now as he's gotten older.
He just seems like a very unlikable person, I guess, and he certainly doesn't try to play politics and is kind of messy in the way that
he's very out there
himself.
and open and honest as well.
Yeah, but damn it. His movies are so good.
It's so fun.
Even Death Proof, even he will say this is his worst movie. Nobody really argues with it. It is still better than most people's best movie.
Yeah, that's true. I would say about him that he's likably unlikable.
Yeah, that's fair. If you love films, how can you not be charmed by how much this man loves films? Although his taste is so strange, and he's so absolute about all of his opinions. He's not ever diplomatic about it. It's not, oh, I love the Roger Corman movies. He'll just be like, no, these movies are better. These B movies that nobody else really likes. He's homaging this rather obscure genre of film that the vast majority of people had no access to these movies, period. Even if they wanted to see them, they didn't live near a theater. If you didn't live in an urban center, you would have never even heard of the scene. It feels like a very niche thing that took place in a short period of time that happened to include his life. He happened to live somewhere at the right time, right place, where he could see these movies and he had this opportunity. For most people, have no point of reference to this devoted homage. So, yeah, it's not going to connect with people, Quentin, and it's not even easy to seek it out. Even up until the last 10 years when it would be easy to seek it out, you had to live somewhere that would have a video store that would even carry these movies. Yeah. And if you don't live downtown, urban, somewhere, forget it. That's kind of the Tarantino that's annoying.
I've been trying to listen to his and Roger Avery's podcast for a while now, but they cover so many movies I've never seen. And I get the feeling they would do like we generally do, although you always explain the plot before I do the nutshell. But they're going to talk about it like you've watched it, which they probably should, but I'm going to be lost, so I don't bother.
And you've seen everything.
But they have covered so many movies. I have generally not listened to their podcast. I'm not a huge fan of Avery's daughter either. I think she has way too much airtime. It's like Conan O'Brien's assistant on his podcast. I give up because who is this? I want to hear Conan's thoughts, not yours. But that's not really even the point when it comes to Tarantino and Avery. It's more that I'm going to be lost, so I'm not going to listen to you guys because you've covered so many movies I've either never heard of or just haven't seen. But here's a guy that I just said likably unlikable. I do love hearing his opinions on, obviously mostly films. Kevin Smith, I've mentioned a few times, is another one. Mm-hmm. I think he'd be great to be around, and he'd also be frustrating to be around.
And as much as he can frustrate me, it is actually really refreshing to have somebody in this kind of position who doesn't give these mealy-mouthed BS,
True.
Scripted, media-trained answers that are the same for everything. That stuff is so boring. No matter how much I love movies, I have very little patience for 95% of the interview content that comes out when somebody's promoting a film. Whereas Tarantino will tell you exactly what's on his mind, and sometimes it makes you roll your eyes, and sometimes you feel genuinely offended, and sometimes it makes you laugh out loud or think of something in a completely new way. Sometimes it makes you confused and feel stupid or not having even heard of a bunch of movies that he apparently treats like they're very commonly known and well-observed films. I'm just always so grateful that he's out here as an artist, never not surprising us.
That's true, too. And he's supposed to do at least one more movie. He said he was only going to do 10. I think he considers Kill Bill one movie, which I never did. They were months apart.
I'm with him. It's one movie.
Well, that would be his 10th, according to him. I think 11th. And it's about a film critic. People are speculating. We don't know yet. But they're speculating it'll be about Pauline Kael in the 70s. Because I think it's supposed to be in the 70s. And, of course, Pauline Kael was the most famous critic then. All time, it's probably Ebert. We've referenced Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel lots and lots of times over the years. But all time, especially for people that are in the know in the film business, it's probably Pauline Kael. Mm. And she could be very, like him, snooty about her opinions.
Yeah, and acerbic, you know. She did not...
Very smart, but
I
don't know if I'd want to be around her either.
No, she seemed like a real meanie.
But unless she loved your thing. Yeah. She loved De Palma, which she does too. Okay, the movie's 235-1. We saw it on Stars. It's also on Prime, and we have the DVD, so we had all kinds of options on how to watch this. I mentioned Tarantino shot it. Sally Menke did cut it, and you've always said that ever since she died after Inglourious Bastards, his films haven't been the same. They've also been longer, generally speaking. Hollywood is too long. Hateful Eight is over 3 hours long. And what's the other one? Django Unchained is about 2:45 or something like that.
Obviously, she was a very talented editor. Also worked with him from the beginning.
Could probably say no.
Could say no. She's probably one of the few people. He replaced her with her assistant.
Fred
which is
Raxon,
actually,
I think is his name.
Yeah, and that's a really cool thing to do, to give him that opportunity. But there's no way that guy feels as bold about expressing his opinions. Maybe he just doesn't have the same knack for story that Sally Menke did. She was obviously a gifted editor.
So I mentioned what happens next already. Mike's probably dead. Looks like his face just got exploded by Rosario Dawson's boot. And the girls have a taste for blood now, so they go kill Jasper. The guy who owns that Challenger.
I mean, that's one way to solve that car problem.
Yeah, except their friend is traumatized, and is she going to tell on them for what they did when they go back to the movies shoot?
Kill her too.
She's more important than they are in that film shoot. A makeup person, a couple stunt people. Hate to say it, but they're more replaceable than one of the actresses is. Although Dawson, such a fan of hers in this, even though she doesn't really have the best role. I'd love to see her and Sidney Poitier do a movie together, meaning the daughter do a movie together.
Mm-hmm. So cool.
So yeah, the movie's a little disjointed, deliberately, of course, it resets, but we still liked it. Your last thoughts on Death Proof?
His most flawed film. It's probably least entertaining film, sloppiest film. But I just love the stuff that works so much. Mainly Kurt Russell and that absolutely bonkers car chase.
Yeah, and also I love that he gives great roles to women. Okay, so that critic thought that Margot Robbie was wasted in Hollywood, but that's not true about this movie. That's not true about Kill Bill, obviously. It's not even really true about Pulp Fiction because Uma Thurman's got one of the best roles in that movie.
And Inglourious Basterds.
Jackie Brown, the lead character, is a black woman. Bastards,
Yeah.
The hero of that movie is a woman.
Yeah.
Or I guess the two heroes, but especially the theater owner. What do you know?
And they're not like boring Wonder Women either. They don't fall into that trap of, well, in order for a woman to be a hero, she has to be perfect.
The
No,
best
they're
role
so flawed and
in Hateful Eight
interesting.
is Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Oh,
and nominated for that.
Yes, and she's incredible in that movie.
But he is sometimes a little maddening. But I do love hearing his thoughts on things, and I certainly feel a kindred spirit with somebody who talks 950 miles an hour.
Yeah, that's
Talks
true.
as fast as they drive in this movie. So humdinger of an action film, and of course the women do get bloody revenge, part of Revenge Month. In 4 days, I'll be posting another show on my own, and I'll be covering a Mike Nichols film for the first time in about 8.5 years. This will also be the first time there's ever been a Melanie Griffith movie on this channel. Which revenge movie would that be? Why, it's Working Girl, which apparently fits this theme mostly. It's not bloody revenge in that case, it's corporate revenge.
And just like Melanie Griffith, you have a mind for business and a bod for sin.
Good line. Harrison Ford is a lot of fun in that movie, in a different kind of role for him. Sigourney Weaver, we haven't covered her in a long time either, but I'll be talking about it alone. When Bev and I team up again in 7 days, we'll be going back only a few years to cover an Oscar winner about a woman scorned, or more accurately, a woman fighting on behalf of a friend who was scorned, as Carey Mulligan gets tough in Promising Young Woman. That movie came out on Christmas Day in 2020.
Merry Christmas.
I think it played in some theaters. Well, it definitely played in some theaters, and then, of course, we saw it streaming. I think it was on your birthday, wasn't it?
It was my birthday present. We paid
Right.
full price to stream it.
And there's a lot of meat in that bone, too. The coming attractions trivia for Promising Young Woman. In 2020, Emerald Fennell and Chloe Zhao, who did Nomadland, were the second and third women to get nominated for writing, directing, and producing a single movie. Fennell even won for her original screenplay that night, while Zhao won for directing and producing. Who was the first woman to get nominated for those same 3 awards for a single movie?
All right, so for the answer to that question, check out next week's podcast about Promising Young Woman. You obviously know how to find us already, but let me remind you to favorite or subscribe wherever you listen. It's also where you'll find our archive of 505 episodes that are available for free. We're both on Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis Ellis, and Ryan is at MovieFiend51. You can also reach us by email. Have you ever seen podcast@gmail.com? And you can find our podcast plus bonus material on our YouTube channel, which is at HYES Ellis.
Lately, we've had less bonus material. It's just been the episode itself. But we didn't say we're going to do that every week anyway.
There's a lot of archive of bonus material for people to enjoy, Ryan. Don't undersell us. We're very charming.
We're also busy. Can't do it every week.
And lastly, to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
I'm okay. Let's end this bastard.
And cut.
Let's kill this